My name is Kari and this is
Lasse.
And we work for the Storting. And today we have the pleasure of inviting you on a virtual guided tour. The Parliament's building was completed in 1866, and when it was officially opened, it ended a more than 30-year-long debate about where the building was to be located, how they're going to finance it, and who would have the honor of designing this important building. The one that in the end got the job was a fairly unknown architect at the time, the Swedish Emil Victor Langlet. He suggested a radical design in which he wanted the physical shape of the building to reflect some of the important principles of democracy. He wanted the building to symbolize openness by placing the chamber visible from the outside, and on either side of it, two wings that would serve as arms, inviting the people in to join into democracy.
In the staircase hall, we have paintings of the three kings Norway has had since the dissolution of the Union from Sweden in 1905. We will start with King Haakon, originally a prince of Denmark named Karl, but when he then accepted the throne of Norway, he became King Haakon. One final obstacle for him was the referendum, because we democratically elected him as the King of Norway. Then we have King Olav, his son, known as the People's King. And finally, we have King Harald, the current King of Norway and head of state. But while he is the head of state, he holds no real political power. In the political world, he has two tasks. To have the state opening of the parliament in October. The other one is the King in Council, where he meets the government, they bring the acts of parliament, and he gives his royal assent. Usually no problem, he always says yes.
This room is called the Eidsvoll Gallery. It draws its name from the town where our constitution was signed in 1814. And the 17th of May 1814 is still a very important day for Norwegians when we celebrate our constitution every year. 1814 was a very important year for Norway, and also a very eventful one. In only 1 year, Norway had no less than 3 different kings and underwent a transformation from an absolute monarchy to a fairly modern democracy. During the Napoleonic Wars, Norway was in a union with Denmark and had sided with Napoleon, whilst our Swedish neighbours were in a coalition against Napoleon. The Danish Crown Prince, Christian Frederick, vice-regent in Norway, refused to accept this. He saw this as an opportunity to claim himself king. He called together an assembly of the country's most influential men to discuss the country's future. They called for a liberal constitution and a king elected by the people, and convinced him of organizing elections throughout the country for a constituent assembly. An assembly of 112 men was then elected, the parishes throughout the country, and they met at Eidsvoll in the spring of 1814. During 6 weeks, they sat together to draft and discuss Norway's constitution, and it was finally signed on the 17th of May, and Christian Frederick was elected King of Norway. But Norway was not to stay independent for very long. As soon as the news reached Stockholm, and as soon as the Swedish army was back from mainland Europe, the Swedish king declared war on Norway. A short war broke out in the summer of 1814, leading to the ceasefire and Treaty of Moss in August 1814. Norway had to accept a new union with Sweden. The two countries would share a common king and had a joint foreign policy. However, due to successful negotiations, Norway was able to maintain its constitution and its parliament that would rule in internal matters. This union would last until 1905, and only then did Norway gain full independence.
The union was not without its problems. Increasing tension between Norway and Sweden culminated in the implementation of parliamentary rule in 1884. A movement led by Johan Sverdrup wanted to increase the power of the parliament and decrease the power of the king. The way they did it was by forcing the government to meet in the main chamber and be held accountable to their policies. And in 1884, they removed the Selmer government from power. In practice, this meant that it would be the parliament, not the king, who chose the government. While the king retained the power to appoint the government, a king could not appoint a government without the support of parliament. Increasing discontent with the union led the parliament to pass a bill on creating our own consulates. The king did not give his royal assent, and on the 7th of June 1905, the parliament unilaterally dissolved the union with Sweden. We are now in the central hall. This is an important room in the Parliament building. This is where the members of Parliament, members of government meet the journalists.
We've now entered the chamber of the Storting, and this is where the 169 members of Parliament all have their dedicated seat. And one of the quite unique things about the Norwegian Parliament is how the seating is organised. Whilst in most countries throughout the world, the members of Parliament are seating according to their political parties, in Norway they seat according to their constituencies. This means that members from two opposite political parties can be seated next to one another. The seats in the first row are reserved for members of government, led by the Prime Minister, whose seat is in the middle of the first row. On either side of the podium, there are dedicated seats. On the one hand, for diplomats and members of Supreme Court, and on the opposite side, for members of press. All the sittings in Parliament are open, and the public can follow from the gallery or follow the live streaming on our website. And to administer it all, the President of Parliament, who chairs the sittings from the podium.
When it's finally your turn to speak, you have to go up to one of the three rostrooms, and the first thing you have to do is address the President of the Parliament. So you will start by saying, "President, what is the government's plan for the coronavirus?" The debates are very formal and the rules are strict. There is no booing, clapping, shouting. You're not allowed to speak from your seat. You're only allowed to speak from one of the three rostrooms. And it's all written down in the Storting's rules of procedure. But occasionally you have members of Parliament who break these rules. And then it's up to the President of the Parliament to address that rule break. Some of these incidents include bad language, a bike helmet, and even a football shirt when the members of Parliament's favorite team won the National League.
Norway has a multi-party system, and there are currently 9 political parties represented in Parliament. 3 political parties make up our current government. The Conservative Party has the Prime Minister's seat, the Liberal Party and the Christian Democratic Party. Elections are organised every 4 years, and in Norway you cannot call for new election. It means that the assembly elected will sit for 4 years regardless of the government being forced to step down. If so, a new government will be formed based on the results on the last elections. Our electoral system is based on proportional representation in 19 constituencies. 150 of the 169 seats are based purely upon proportional representation, whilst the remaining 19 are so-called at-large seats that are there to even out discrepancies in the first distribution.
A normal day at the Parliament starts at 10 o'clock, where at least half the members of Parliament needs to be present in this chamber to start the day. But soon after the sitting has started, a lot of the members of Parliament will leave the chamber, and about 10 to 15 members of Parliament will be present for the actual debate. The reason for this is that the members of Parliament are divided into 12 standing committees. So let's take an example. If you have a debate about the military, then the Committee for Foreign Affairs and Defence will take seat, and the Minister for Defence will take seat. But while the member of government is part of the debate, he or she is not allowed to vote.